open. And how many RSVPs do we have so far?
Almost 2,000.
Yeah, pretty excited.
So tell us about American Solutions and how you expect it to gain momentum for the midterm elections in the
Well, I started out in 2006 really asking three fundamental questions that I thought the American political system was breaking down on, partly, frankly, educated by Sacramento. One is, who are we? And what are we trying to accomplish? I mean, how do we define ourselves? The second is, what does it take to successfully compete with China and India so we remain the highest value-added, most productive, most creative, and most prosperous economy, which is the absolute requirement to remain a national security leader. And the third is, what threatens us and what are we going to do about it? Which is, in the long run, China, although I would argue that China is only a problem to the degree that we fail to reform the United States. That if we, in fact, get our act together, the Chinese can't compete with us for the next 100 years. In the short run, it's clearly the irreconcilable wing of Islam, which has a deep, bitter opposition to Western culture, and which is prepared to kill us in order to impose their values over ours. So I started from that background, and it struck me that the political system in its current form doesn't develop long arguments and doesn't develop large solutions. That it tends to be chopped into what are you going to do on this evening's news show kind of stuff, or what are you going to do with the most recent blog site. And so we began developing at American Solutions. It was built on a model I had developed earlier at the Center for Health Transformation, where we have really developed a momentum, if you go to healthtransformation.net, of fundamentally better and newer solutions in healthcare. And so we thought, as a proof of principle, that it was possible to begin developing a new generation of things. I was deeply influenced by three books. And I realize I may be the only former elected official who wanders through and says, here are the sources, the source documents. One was actually, ironically, from a former press secretary for Bella Abzug and Mario Cuomo, Harold Holzer, who's the vice president of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, who wrote a brilliant book called Lincoln and Cooper Union. A second was a book by an American novelist, Claire Berlinski, The City of Berlin with S.K. on it, called There Is No Alternative, Why Margaret Thatcher Matters. And the third, actually, so there are four books. The third was a book about Ronald Reagan by Tom Evans called The Education of Ronald Reagan, which is really an extraordinary look at the 8 years Reagan worked for General Electric and what he learned, and why you should look at Reagan's speeches as education documents, not communications documents. The book is actually extraordinary, and Evans is a very interesting guy who I hope is going to work with us at Solutions this year. Now retired. He was a young lawyer in 1967 at the Rose Mudge Law Firm, and Richard Nixon said, would you like to join Len Garment and one other lawyer and help design the '68 campaign? And then he went from Nixon to Reagan, and now is a very senior, semi-retired attorney, and has written a work of genius. And the fourth book actually was by Sarkozy, who, when he was running for president of France, even though he was in the cabinet of the incumbent president, ran as the agent of change and pinned the socialist candidate as the advocate of reactionary unionized bureaucracy. And did it brilliantly. And he wrote a book called Testimony, which I recommend to anybody who wants to understand where we are, because his description of the crisis of French culture and Berlinski's description of the crisis of Britain in the 1970s fits Sacramento to a T. And Sacramento was in my mind, Sacramento and Albany were the canaries in the coal mine. They were the early harbingers of Washington. They were telling us that bureaucratic unions and lobbyists have now crippled the process of self-government to such a degree that you can't solve problems in a manner consistent with government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So that was the background. American Solutions is a gathering of citizens. We have how many now on the email?
1,500,000.
About 1,500,000 email members, about 250,000 donors. It's a 527, which means that it can take unlimited personal or corporate after-tax money. And Our goal is, and one of the most recent documents that will help you see what we're doing, is a document at AmericanSolutions.com called Replace, Not Reform, which I actually wrote for Governor McDonnell and his new cabinet. They asked me to come and keynote a 2-day planning session before they took over in Virginia. And I said, the problems are so deep. If you look at LA Unified, you can't reform it.
Exactly.
You got to replace it. And LA Unified is a hopelessly corrupt mess, a fundamentally dishonest system. And I was at Claremont at Scripps College last night. Had a wonderful time. And I just said everybody should read The Rubber Room in the New Yorker, which is the story of the New York City $50 million a year putting bad teachers in rooms to do nothing for the 7 years it takes to fire them. So I'm going to give you 2 summary things, and I'll take questions. But I want you to understand, my first point is the most important political phrase of the next quarter century is 2 + 2 = 4. And you can look at our various writing, and we explain why. It'll be in a book in May called To Save America. And my argument's very straightforward. It comes out of Camus' The Plague, where he says, there are times when a man will be killed for saying 2 + 2 = 4 because the authorities can't stand the truth. I guarantee you go to an LA Unified school board meeting and tell the truth, and you will immediately be inundated by people who want to shut you up. They don't want to debate the facts, they want to shut you up because they can't survive the facts. Okay, second, I describe in my upcoming book that we have a secular socialist machine which is fundamentally trying to change the country. My younger daughter, Jackie Cushman, writes a column, which you all ought to pick up, actually. It's a weekly column.
Did you speak the book?
That's right. She and I co-wrote that book, and she actually writes a very good column. About 2 months ago, she wrote, we were told we were voting for change you could believe in, and found that we were voting for people who wanted to change what we believe. And my favorite test case of this is to go 3.5 hours out of LA on US 15, turn south for 8 miles, and look at the cross in the middle of the Mojave Desert erected by the VFW in 1934 to honor the dead of World War I, and the box that currently is over it because the ACLU is threatened by a cross in the middle of the Mojave Desert. If that's not a totalitarian model, then I don't understand the meaning of the word. So I think we're headed towards, in 10, 12, 14, and 16, one of the great decisive election cycles in American history. We're either going to decide to be a secular socialist system run by a corrupt machine, or we're going to decide to throw the rascals out at every level, from Washington to Sacramento to Los Angeles. And it'll be a period of tumult comparable to the Progressive era. Hiram Johnson will understand the next 6 or 8 or 10 years. So that's sort of what we're doing. American Solutions' job is to appeal to Democrats, Republicans, and Independents on a tripartisan basis, and to try to find a way to help 513,000 elected offices, because that's the number there are in America.
And bend toward throw the rascals out.
And it's a combination of throw the rascals out and replace systems that don't work with new systems.
I have a practical question.
Sure.
This state is owned and operated by public unions.
Right.
It's without a doubt they put the people in office who hold the majority position, who vote for what they want, more of the same, and are strengthening their hold rather than loosening it.
Right.
How do you reverse that when the people in control are setting the agenda?
2 things that come directly out of California history. First, words matter. The morning you start writing about bureaucratic unions rather than public unions, the morning you talk about bureaucratic education rather than public education. If we created a Pell Grant program for K through 12, which is how I would describe vouchers, because then let the left explain why Pell Grants are bad. It's still public money.
My preference is to call it government schools, not public schools.
But I call them bureaucratic schools.
That's good.
Bureaucratic's worse than government. And it explains why they don't work.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, I'd say you have to talk about the bureaucratic unions. And you have to, the morning the average Californian knows the pension, health care, total lifetime cost of a bureaucratic union member, they will start throwing them out. The second thing you have to do is exactly what happened. Remember, the bureaucratic unions and the trial lawyers and the left-wing activist groups today are approximately the same as the railroad interests in 1896. And so if you look at the rise of La Follette in Wisconsin and you look at the rise of Johnson in California, it's the same fight, which is there is this very powerful machine which is clearly exploiting the state and destroying its economy, and which is antithetical to self-government. and there's the rest of us. Now, one morning, the rest of us get together. We're just doing a movie